In this video, I'm going to address amblyopia, commonly known as lazy eye. In another video, I address strabismus. I'm Dr. Moshe Roth. I'm a developmental optometrist, board certified in vision development and vision therapy. The term lazy eye is used for both strabismus, meaning eye turn, and for amblyopia. These are actually two different things, but they're both called lazy eye. I'd like to clarify what amblyopia actually is. Strabismus is when one eye turns in or turns out relative to the other, and that's why it's often called a lazy eye. Amblyopia is when information from one eye, or sometimes both eyes, hasn't developed. This is the topic we're going to address. In a different video, I addressed what an eye turn means, and I would encourage you to watch that video. In this video, I'm going to address amblyopia, lazy eye. Amblyopia falls into two main categories: refractive amblyopia and strabismic amblyopia. I'm going to address each one. Refractive amblyopia means that we're not getting a clear picture onto the back part of the eye. Think of a picture that's out of focus. It's hard to see the details, so it's going to be hard to remember the details. Refractive amblyopia can be vision that hasn't developed on one side, or it hasn't developed on both sides. Let me explain. You might ask yourself, what does vision develop mean? And what do we mean by vision never developed? Think of a flower seed. If you put a flower seed in the palm of your hand, it has the potential to develop, but we need to create the right conditions for that to happen. We need to plant the seed into good soil. If it's in beach sand, it'll never grow. We need to have water. Without water, it'll never develop. We need to have heat and sunlight, and without that, it'll never develop. So to recap, the seed needs the right type of dirt, water, heat, and sunlight. Vision is somewhat similar. If we don't have a clear picture focused onto the back part of the eye, the retina, then vision will not develop. When there's a large difference between the two eyes, then the brain usually develops the vision from the one side that's closer to being able to see clearly without much of a prescription at all. The brain never gets a clear picture from the other side, so it just starts to ignore it. It never develops. Often, this really affects more than just the other eye. Since the two eyes don't develop together as a team, it then affects what comes into the brain, and it can affect the ability to read, or to catch a ball, or to ride a bicycle, or ultimately to drive a car effectively. It's like that flower seed that's planted into poor soil or doesn't get enough water. It just doesn't develop. It can be done, but it's much more difficult because the two aren't well coordinated. When a child turns off the information from one eye in order to reduce confusion, then the information from that side doesn't develop. The two eyes may still seem as though they're pointing straight, so it's not obvious to others. The first type of refractive amblyopia that we just talked about is unilateral or one-eye amblyopia. The second type of refractive amblyopia is bilateral amblyopia. When both eyes are farsighted, the back of either eye never gets a clear picture. In this type of amblyopia, both eyes are termed lazy. It can make reading and studying a lot more difficult and frustrating. It may not be obvious when someone looks because they may not have an eye that turns. And that's why it's so important to bring in a child early, similar to a well baby visit. The third most common form of amblyopia is due to strabismus. Strabismus means that one eye points straight and the other eye doesn't point in the same direction. Here too, it's difficult to put the two pictures, one from each eye, together. So we learn to turn off one of the images. And then ultimately, the vision from that side just doesn't develop. When vision doesn't develop, it's very hard for someone to judge depth or how far something is from you. If someone doesn't develop depth perception, it's hard to catch a ball or to judge the distances between cars when driving. If a child has difficulty in using the two eyes together, then they don't want to do team sports such as soccer or baseball because it's hard for them to tell where the ball is and where to position their body or arms in order to catch the ball. It can then cause someone to get into an accident or have trouble parking a car. It can cause someone to be clumsy. More importantly, it can affect how someone reads, so it can affect how someone does in school and how they feel about themselves if they don't do well in school. I hope I've given you some valuable information and have helped simplify a complex issue. We're just hitting some of the highlights in this video. Fortunately, there are ways that we can help someone if they have amblyopia. It's best to solve amblyopia, lazy eye, in childhood so the child can succeed in school. But we can also help adults who've had amblyopia for a long time. I often hear adults say, "Oh yeah, I was told to patch one eye when I was younger, but I never did." Well, that's okay, because the good news is that patching never really works long-term anyway. If you think about it, the goal is to get the two eyes to work together as a team. How does patching one eye help the two work together? The fact is, it doesn't. The hopes are that once we remove the patch, the two will somehow work together almost miraculously, but that never really happens. It's like teaching somebody how to play the piano by just having them use one hand at a time. If you never practice using the two together, you're never going to be able to integrate the two effectively. There are, however, many eye doctors that still prescribe patching, even though it isn't an effective long-term treatment. Vision therapy, prisms, special therapeutic contact lenses, and syntonic phototherapy are ways that we're able to help someone gain or regain the ability to use the two eyes together as a team. Please consider calling our office at 732-679-2020 and scheduling for an examination. I'd be happy to help. I'm Dr. Moshe Roth. I'm a developmental optometrist, board certified in vision development and vision therapy.